Welcome into Raptors at the Half. Sherman Hamilton, David Amber, great to have you along. It was a pretty wild ride. 33 games in 59 nights for the Raptors, 10 of those games victories. A lot of growing pains, obviously, for a young team, especially learning from a new head coach in Dwayne Casey.
Yeah, it's a difficult ride. A shortened preseason. These guys are trying to get a defensive philosophy implemented and try to remove the offensive mentality that they had. And for Dwayne Casey, it's a lot of teaching, a lot of defensive teaching. But that's going to come with growing pains, as you mentioned. Guys are going to have to figure out how to play under this type of stressful situation, learn, develop, and still contribute on the offensive end. A lot packed in this early part of the season for the Raptors. Maybe not the wins that they wanted to, but they've definitely taken some steps from a defensive perspective.
Yeah, a lot of competitiveness by the Raptors. Remember, 19 games in the month of January, a franchise record. Overall, the organization had a lot to say about the first half of this season.
The experience for the Raptors to this point, I think, has been good. I think the thing that we haven't done is close games out when we've had an opportunity to do that. Part of that is inexperience. Part of it is the maturation process that needs to take place.
We're playing good. We're not getting blown out by teams. We just have that little inch we need to make a step up. You know, we're losing games by 1 and 2 points, so it's a little bit more, and I think we'll be fine.
We're still learning, but there's no excuses, you know. We're up by 10 going into fourth quarter a couple of times on some top-notch teams. And just not being able to close it out is really where we're at right now. I say if we could play a hard first quarter and finish games out, we're going to be a tough team to beat.
Here's a cut, and there's James Johnson!
You know, finding the right consistency in performance, in productivity is huge. There is no question. I expected it. Am I disappointed when it happens? Yes, but it's something that I expected from a young team, but still trying to push to get to that level of consistency that we got to have and we need to have to be a playoff team.
Andrea Bargnani with Scott McCullough, and Scott McCullough just looked over at the coaches and said he's out. Look at him, he's just heartbroken.
I didn't expect not having big pieces of our offensive output during the season. The long-term injuries to Andrea, and that's something that you can't predict.
Bargnani is a big guy, obviously missing, but we don't need him to win games. You know, I think when he comes back, he always gives us our boost of confidence, but if we can find that without him, then we'll be rolling.
It's been good. You know, I think we've obviously had a lot of changes this year, and we're still a young team, so you know, we're just trying to continue to get better and just continue to learn every day. So it's a process. You know, that's one of the things I've been saying. It's a process, and you know, we still got a long ways to go, and we definitely can turn this thing around and continue to make the push toward the playoffs.
When you look at the total body of work, there has been improvement on the defensive end. Offensively, we're starting to execute better. Now it's just a matter of getting that third and most important ingredient in the equation, which is how you finish games to win it.
Yes! Bang on!
You know, we can play with anybody in this league, you know, especially when we go out there and put our minds to it. You know, once we start to do that on a consistent basis, you know, I think we'll be fine, and we definitely got to do that second half of the season.
And sure, maybe the biggest difference we're noticing from the Raptors this season is how well they're playing on defense. Last year, they allowed 100-plus points 54 times. This year, through 33 games, just 8 times, the other team has hit the century mark. With more on their improved defense and their thoughts on the first half, how about Jack Armstrong and Leo Routens? Guys?
Thanks so much, fellas. And, you know, you look at the Raptors, much improved under Dwayne Casey in terms of the defensive philosophy. Leo, what's the thing that you've really liked seeing from this club so far?
Well, Jack, I think the one thing that has impressed me is accountability. You know, Dwayne Casey just basically, there's nobody that gets a pass. You're either going to do it or it's going to affect your minutes, it's going to affect your whole playing scenario. So the fact that everybody's got to do exactly what's supposed to be done defensively, that everybody knows exactly what the plan is. And I think in the past there wasn't necessarily a concrete plan defensively. Now everybody is on the same page, and I think that's critical, and that's been a big change.
Attention to detail has been a critical factor for the Raptors, and the level of effort. I've really been impressed with those two things from them defensively, and that's got to continue. Injuries have been an issue when you look at this club, particularly Andrea Bargnani. If you could kind of forecast what the Raptors would have been like with a Bargnani, maybe even a Bayless, what type of team would you think?
Well, if you think about it, Jack, I think we'd see Andrea Bargnani in the All-Star game right now. The Raptors are one game under 500 with Andrea Bargnani in the lineup. When you take 27% of your offense out of the mix, I mean, those are Kobe type of numbers. The Raptors just don't have enough talent at this point to absorb that. So, you know, this would be a very different team. And you mentioned Bayless, because think of the minutes Calderon has played. And, you know, too many minutes just wears him down. It's too much stress for him physically. So I think the Raptors might be in a very different situation had both of these players been healthy all season long.
I think if you look at the Boston Celtics and the New York Knicks right now, the 7 and 8 spots, I think the Toronto Raptors with a healthy Bargnani and Bayless would be challenging for one of those spots. So as much as things have been frustrating, I think injuries have had a big impact on things. Now for another take. We're not the only guys, Leo.
Yeah.
Now it's Eric Smith and Paul Jones. Fellas?
All right, Jack, Leo, you guys touched on Jose Calderon. Eric, let's continue that train of thought. He's really come around this year. I mean, a lot of people were on his defense. He's shown signs defensively of improving, and his offense isn't bad either.
Well, and his offense is especially picked up, I think, in the absence of Andrea Bargnani, Jonesy. And the one thing as well that you've heard some of the rumblings over the course of the season, even if it's mostly from fans and not necessarily media, about maybe trading or trading while the stock is high. You have to really be careful with what you might do with Jose Calderon if you're actually buying into that trade mentality. You know how much both of us despise fantasy trade stuff.
Yeah.
But you got to think about the fact that, well, you've got this guy and he's playing at an elite level. What's your backup plan? No pun intended. The Raptors had an option to go out and extend Jared Bayless. They decided not to. They still hold his rights as a restricted free agent. You go into the offseason, and what are you doing if you trade Jose Calderon unless you're getting back an elite point guard in return? And you don't have a young guard in the system that's coming up, and you look ahead to the draft in June, and you project right now, as of, you know, late February, there's not anybody that's talked about going in the top 10 or even 15. Right. So you're not probably getting the point guard via the draft either. So who's the future point guard of this team a year from now, let alone 3, 5 years from now, if you're deciding to move the guy? I say you keep him and you ride this hot streak.
Well, another guy, when you talk about young players important for the Toronto Raptors, is DeMar DeRozan. He's shown signs of stepping his game up and improving. When you look at his overall scoring, he's done a terrific job in scoring when he's able to get to the free throw line. I think it's still part of the growth and maturation process that comes with a young player. DeMar learning a new system defensively, being held accountable for that, and yet trying to keep the offensive gains that he made last year moving forward. So that's the biggest thing that we'll look at in the second half. What happens with Jose Calderon? Can DeMar DeRozan continue to go forward? Let's hear what two other guys have to say, Sherman Hamilton and David Amber.
All right, thank you, guys. Of course, Andrea Bargnani missing 20 games so far this season, so a lot of the offensive pressure being thrust onto one DeMar DeRozan. Up next at Raptors at the half, Matt Devlin's going to go one-on-one with Raptors' new head coach, Dwayne Casey.